So tonight we are going to be talking about organizing your writing project and some strategies and tips for that to help me kind of understand the audience. Bonnie, what level are you at, doc or grad? Help me kind of know where you are.
I'm a doc student.
Okay, excellent. And Jen and Tonda and Sunny and Destiny are Dr. Higgins and Dr. Bonfini and Mr. Jackson. Could you, if you're able, is that Miss Jackson? Mr. Chance?
That's me.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, okay, so good. So I am going to target this towards the doctoral level of things then, since most of our audience is doctoral students. If there are graduate students who are watching this recording, this will still be helpful to you, but I will use a lot of doctoral based examples then. Okay, so let me share my screen. Here we go. Excellent. Okay, can we see the presentation? Give me a thumbs up if we, yes, excellent, great. Okay, so organizing your writing project. All right, so our learning objectives are going to be to identify common writing errors that happen, distinguish the types of writing that you might do across the program, provide fundamental strategies for organizing your writing, and also to describe the resources that are at play. All right, and then there are many different ways that we're going to communicate as professionals, right? And each one of these really does require a different approach in how you write your response. And I honestly think that was something that took me a little while to learn, right? I thought, okay, I can just respond in the same way every time. And I tend to be very content driven. And so I'm very task oriented. And so it took some time for me to learn that I could write my response to the task, but then I also had to take time to respond relationally to somebody. So I might actually have to come back in and add that piece to it because it's not my immediate go-to in order to be able to build relationships, especially in an asynchronous or online environment. So the first learning objective is going to be to identify common writing errors that I have seen over time, and I'm welcome others to chime in, but these are some of the big ones that I noticed that kind of happen on a regular basis. Clarity and conciseness, and I'm going to give you some tools a little bit later that will help with this. But taking the time to review something to see, is there a better way that I might be able to say it? Is there a more concise way that I can say it? Fluff is not your friend in academic writing or in professional writing. It really is something you want to try to train yourself to get rid of and to try to really get down to what's the meat of what you're trying to say and really think about how you are saying it. So being very intentional about it. Poor sentence structure, inconsistent formatting or citations. One of the best things you can do for yourself is really get grounded in APA. I'm a little tentative to share this, but let's think about this. I'm on my 5th version of APA. And so that tells you how long I've been in the field a little bit. But that means that I've had to learn over time and adjust to new formats and citations. So it is something that isn't going to be static. You're going to have to relearn it. I think one of the things that I have really integrated into my own professional development is every year in June, I go through the APA tutorial. Might sound redundant, might sound unnecessary, but it helps me make sure that I'm up to date, that I'm current, because I too forget things. And I find it to be really helpful. So I really schedule that into my calendar and I try to do that every June. Okay. Plagiarism, of course, is a major concern. I also am seeing more and more dependence on AI to do the writing for you. And unfortunately, AI is not always up to date. And it has a certain style of speaking that's kind of recognizable. So, when you're writing in your tone and then all of a sudden you put something in there that's from AI, it stands out like a sore thumb. We can actually see the difference. So it's not that you can't use AI as a tool, but you wouldn't want to depend on AI for things. You still need to use your voice. You need to give credit where credit is due. Proofreading, editing, this kind of also goes to the very last point, which is rushing the process. That when you don't give yourself enough time to let something set and then be able to come back to it, you're not going to be able to catch the errors, right? So you're going to want to make sure you build in enough time to be able to review and to proof what you're doing. I've seen some pretty funny errors and things where things have been misspelled consistently and things like that. But for the most part, those things could be caught if you gave yourself a break from what you're writing and then came back and looked at it fresh. Having a strong thesis statement, we'll be talking about that and what a strong paragraph structure looks like. Not including counter arguments, right? You don't want to write for what you're writing. You want to write about what you're talking about. So you've got to give both sides. You've got to give all the perspectives for it to truly be a comprehensive perspective. Overuse of passive voice. Oh my goodness, this is like my pet peeve. Like I write PV on a lot of things, passive voice. So that's where you have a linking verb and a past tense. There are a few times where it is appropriate to use passive voice, but really ask yourself when you use passive voice, when you have a past tense verb that has was or is or something in front of it, is there a better way to say this? Because oftentimes there is. What usually happens is you are personifying an object or you have your sentence backwards. Okay, so let me think about this example because it's hard for me to think in passive voice. But something like the survey is collected through SurveyMonkey. Okay, the survey is not collecting itself. Who is collecting the survey, right? The researcher is collecting the survey through SurveyMonkey. I am collecting the survey through, or I will collect the survey through. So it's really intentional to think about it because your reader will really like you much more if you're not using that passive voice. Because when I read something in passive voice, I have to think about who is the subject of it. And that makes me do more work than you're doing. So make sure you've got the true subject in your sentences, and that will help with that. Pronouns. As a counselor, I love pronouns. It, this, them, she, her. I use pronouns all the time as a counselor. But when I'm writing, I need to write about what I'm actually writing about and not assume that my audience knows who and what I'm talking about. So really search those papers for it. It is not your friend. One of my English teachers taught me, and that's very true, right? Try to get rid of the its, the thises, and the thems. Transition words, we're going to talk about the importance of linking in a little bit. I actually have in one of my folders that I keep on my desk a list of transition words. It's kind of a cheat sheet for me of transition words when I'm writing that I can use that help me think about how am I going to move from this idea to this idea. Misuse of terminology or the overuse. Now, if you're working in your dissertation, which I know a couple of you are, and maybe in comps, if those are multiple choice now, but you want to be sure that you are using consistent terminology. So there's a difference between overuse and consistent use. Consistent use is super important when you're talking about research. So you don't want to say in one place, I'm talking about adolescents, but then talk about teens, then talk about youth. That is not good, right? You want to actually be adolescents, 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 adolescents throughout. So in research, especially, it's important to have consistency in the terms you're using. Reading the assignment, making sure you're actually following the assignment. We're going to show some examples of that. And then, of course, rushing the process. So those are some of the biggies that I see with writing errors. Write so your readers don't have to guess what you're trying to do. Right? You need to really understand, okay, where do I want my readers to go and how am I going to get there? This is where mapping is super helpful, right? Like map out your ideas. If you're a creative soul and you like the mapping structures, you can do that. I'm a Post-it person. I like to organize my ideas through Post-its or through Excel, but have some way that you lay out the logic and maybe have somebody who isn't familiar with it, look at it and say, well, I don't know how you got from here to here. Because sometimes you may be assuming, building in some assumptions of knowledge that not everybody has. This is where peer review is really helpful and important. And it is certainly something I know I relied on in my program, and I still rely on as a writer and researcher now, is I need that peer review to help me see where I'm skipping steps. Right? Like Destiny's helping me as a TA this term. And I've asked them, okay, if you're reading the book for the class and there are steps that were skipped, I need your help in seeing those because I know exactly what goes in between here and here, step A and step D. And you're like, what is B and C? All right. So it's helpful to have that outside perspective. support your assertions with in citation, like text, right? You want to have those in text citations or parenthetical citations. You want to present a statement, have some evidence, and give examples. And I'm going to give you a tool that's going to help with that. Some of you have heard about the tool before, but we're going to review it. And then follow APA formatting and conventions. Crazy important, because that is like a language format that we use in the profession. And you can really devalue excellent content when it's not presented in a format that other professionals can understand and know where and how you got information from, right? So you don't want to devalue yourself or the materials that you are presenting. So again, what destination do you have in mind? What do the readers need to know? So are there things you need to operationalize? Are there foundations you need to provide? Are there theoretical perspectives that you need to give so that people understand where you're headed? Are there questions that you think your reader might ask? Again, a great place for peer review. Have somebody read it and ask questions about it. What is your map? And then what problems are your readers going to encounter? Are they going to know what this acronym is? Are they going to know what this piece of jargon is? Are they going to understand what this methodology is? You need to be able to explain all of those steps along the way. And then I think this is another important step is I often see where students will respond to questions or assignments at the same level of Bloom's every single time, right? I'm going to tell you what the textbook said. So I'm going to remember what I read, and I'm going to show you that I know what those ideas are. That's great at the undergraduate level, but that's not going to cut it at the graduate or doctoral level. So you need to really think about, where is the prompt? Where is this assignment? At what level of Bloom's taxonomy is this? And really that needs to structure how you're responding to it, right? Because each level of Bloom's taxonomy is looking for something different. It's looking for you to do something with it. And most of your doctoral work is going to be at apply or higher. Okay, so that's really where the bulk of our work is going to be happening, is how do you apply the material? How do you analyze it? How do you evaluate it? How do you create something new, like a dissertation, which is original research? So understanding what Bloom's taxonomy level can help you know how to respond to the prompt. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Dr. Bonfini, Dr. Higgins, anything y'all might add at this point? And it's okay if not.
I was going to say, just the APA is really important to make sure that that is consistent throughout. I think for me, I see that as a really big problem. And the part about clarity. Remember that, you know, your reader might not be the expert that you are, right, in a particular issue. We're developing that alongside you, but you know, you're passionate about this in a way that perhaps your chair or your SME or even your methodologist are not. And we really want to see how that comes across. And sometimes you have to break it down for your reader.
Okay.
And I agree about the APA. Just, I mean, you're kind of showing your own, you know, if you've got blatant errors, you know, my gosh, there's a manual. And by the way, I'm on my 4th manual, so I'm not that far behind you. But yeah, and I'm very, even in my lower number classes, like 536 or so, I still hold them accountable to the APA expectations.
Yeah. All right. And welcome some of the others that have joined us, Dr. Carper, Dr. T. So now we're going to talk about distinguishing types of writing across assignments, because I think oftentimes students, like I said, will address everything in the same way, but there's really a different structure for each thing. And I got this particular elements of the communication thing from a Capella when I worked at Capella, and I think it's a really helpful tool in thinking through how these things might be different. So for a paragraph, of course, you want to have ideally at least 4 sentences, 3 at a minimum, and 1 should be your introduction, have some on your body and conclusion, whereas a discussion post is going to be more about 1, 2, and 1 on paragraphs, right? And a final project, you're going to maybe develop it a little bit deeper in the sense of pages, and comps might be something different. And then dissertation, it's broken up into chapters, right? So it has much more robust response. So let's look at discussion boards to start with. the first thing I will say about discussion boards is read the prompt fully. That's really important. And consider, what analysis is being sought. And this is where using the Bloom's taxonomy can be really helpful. Like, what type of response is being sought here? And then outline the response, and then seek sources that will help ground your response, but show a comprehensive perspective of it. So let's take a look at a sample discussion question. Now, like I said, some of you are doctoral level. I think we have a couple of graduate now that are in the meeting, but really also think about this as a counselor educator, right? How can you help students break this type of question down? Because some of you are counselor educators now and will be counselor educators. So really think about, how can I help students break this down in a way that's helpful to them? So with this sample discussion question, think for a second, what is this question asking? What would be the necessary components of a response that should earn, say, full credit in this way? So I'm going to just give you a second to think about that. So a couple of things stand out to me. One is, in this first statement, it's saying use the assigned reading. So right off the bat, I know I need to use the assigned readings. Now it's saying analyze, which means I need to be a critical consumer of the material. Now it's telling me about knowledge from my personal experience through tradition, authority, and this next word, super important, and intuition. So that means I need to cover all four of these things, not just one of them. There's not an or, right? Then it says evaluate each source of the knowledge in terms of strengths and limitations. So here are my sources of knowledge: personal experience, tradition, authority, and intuition. Now I need to evaluate them in relation to what are the strengths of using that type of knowledge and what are the weaknesses, and apply it to my specific discipline. All right. Now, I came up with two different ways that I might organize this. The first way is having my introduction, where I'm going to restate the question and set up the response. I'm going to say what I'm going to do. So I'm going to have sort of a thesis statement on what I'm going to do and what I'm talking about. In this particular format, I'm going to take each one of the knowledges and I'm going to identify the strengths and limitations of each one. So each one of these would be a paragraph probably, or at least a couple, a few sentences together. And then I'm going to have a conclusion. I could also, and just as effectively, organize it in this way, where I organize it across strengths and limitations. Okay, so I'm doing the same discussion post, but in a very different way, but both are appropriate. But I've used the prompt to outline how I'm going to respond. Now, this next tool, and which will help with this, which is one of my favorites, is the meal plan. And the meal plan is main idea. So for every paragraph, I'm going to have at least one sentence that's going to clearly articulate what the main idea is of that paragraph. Then I'm going to provide some evidence to support that main idea, which means I'll have citations, ideally serial citations that are thematic. Analysis, I'm going to support my position about this particular topic. And then I'm going to link to the next idea. And I have a great example from, some of you may know, Ginevra Gibson, who wrote a beautiful paragraph that I loved. So here's an example, and I've color-coded these across the meal plan. So the first one is, though there is still a dearth of research on gendered racial microaggression, the emerging themes are rooted in stereotypes created by dominant culture to objectify Black women. It's supported. It's a main idea. I know what this paragraph's about. I don't have a question about that. The evidence is Collins has called these stereotypes about Black women controlling images. Controlling images are overgeneralized, often negative depictions of Black women rooted in slavery and based in racist, sexist, and classic ideas. Citations. A serial citation, a beautifully crafted serial citation, organized alphabetically by first author. An example of a commonly known controlling image is the angry Black woman. So that's all my, my evidence. Now my analysis, or Ginevra's analysis, really. Black women, just like all human beings, experience a range of emotions. There is no statistical evidence to show that Black women are angrier than any other group of individuals. Conversely, and here's the counter argument, Black women report overall experiences of less anger than other groups, with a citation. And my link to the next idea, or Ginevra's link to the next idea, is still the angry Black woman image prevails, cited. That is a beautifully crafted paragraph that demonstrates the meal plan. As you noticed in that example, there were no quotations. Quotations weren't in there, especially at the doctoral level and even at the graduate level. I really discourage quotations. Okay. Don't use somebody else's words to speak for you. Okay. Instead, you're looking for themes of ideas that can support the points that you're trying to make. Use these sources and use sources beyond your textbooks and just what's required in the class, right? Go above and beyond for that. Course textbooks are secondary sources. They're a compilation usually of primary sources. Don't trust that what somebody else wrote about a source is in fact the truth about that source. If you, as cited by kind of drives me crazy. I wish we would get rid of it. I know it's necessary sometimes, but I really want you to look at the primary source for yourself, because I will tell you that as a journal reviewer, as a professor, I've seen many things misquoted many times and sometimes multiple times over because somebody misquoted it or miscited it. So really understand the text for yourself. Citing at the end of a paragraph only cites the last sentence. Make sure that you're citing throughout your paragraphs. If you cite something in one paragraph, when you start a new paragraph, it needs to be recited, right? Or when a new idea or new citation interrupts that, it needs to be recited. So make sure you're giving credit where credit is due. It's really important. People work hard for this. You see how hard it is to write. So make sure that you give people the credit for their ideas and make sure you're only take credit for those ideas that are truly your own. Now, APA says there's no real cutoff at 10 years. I want to tell you a little bit about why we suggest a cutoff of 5 to 10 years for citations, and it has a lot to do with how long it takes to get published. Most research takes anywhere from 2 to 5 years to be published. So if I am, using a source that was published in 2014, chances are it was in the publication process from 2012 to 2013. The analysis and draft publication was probably 2011, and the data was probably collected somewhere between 2010 to 2011. So really, when you cite something from 2014, you're really looking at data that could already be almost 5 years old. So keep that in mind when you're using citations and you're thinking about how you're constructing your support, because it's not the published date that's the date of the data. The data is much older than that in most cases. So just keep that in consideration. Now with course papers, introduction, main idea, conclusions, and references, right? With that, the idea is to articulate a topic, provide a brief background, state your main points, and also provide an orientation to the paper in the introduction. And I think that last piece is often missing. So here's an example from Crystal Zanders, another great paragraph. So counselors are humans and are not immune to experiencing emotional reactions during times of crisis. That's an introduction to it, right? COVID and civil unrest during 2020-21 posed similar challenges for counselors and clients. So she's introducing what the issue is. Now she's giving us some evidence. However, limited research has explored this phenomenon, experiencing of counselors and clients simultaneously experiencing these stressors. And she talks about wellness and impairment of Black counselors during crises like the 2 pandemics. And she talks about the type of inquiry that she's going to be using for her study. And then she sums it up by saying, okay, here's what we're going to do in this chapter. Here's what we're going to do next. The chapter will discuss the background and the statement of the problem, the purpose, the significance of the study. There's also going to be a brief discussion of the research design, questions, assumptions, delimitations, and limitations. And it's going to operationalize terms, expected outcomes, and the research position. Lastly, it will conclude with a summary. So she's oriented us, right, as the reader, to what she's doing. Why is she doing it? And what is she going to do? And how is she going to do it? All of that was done. Then we go into the main idea. In our main body, we're going to identify keywords, orient our readers to acronyms and the concepts that we're talking about. We're going to use the library and public databases. We're going to initially look for about 5 times more research than what we need, because we're going to rule out things as we go. For every 5 pages that you write, you should expect to have 10 to 12 articles supporting those 5 pages. One of the things I will say is that I really like to see a robust, comprehensive review of literature. It is kind of we call it chunking a lot when you have a whole paragraph that's supported by one perspective, right? One article, because you're not showing a comprehensive view of it. One article is one opinion of that concept. Once I have multiple articles, now I'm starting to see a thematic concept, a literature concept, concept that's within the literature. One article is not a theme. We'll review those ideas that are central to your topic, design some sort of logic map, either in your head or physically, or maybe through electronics supports, and really map out how you're going to link these themes together, and be sure that you're responding to the assignment prompt. And when I'm talking about themes, I like to think about it kind of like a cocktail party or a summer, cookout type thing where I'm going to invite all my friends over, right? And let's say that Jen and I are going to have coffee next day, okay? I'm not going to go and have coffee with Jen and say, well, Jen, Bonnie said this, and Sunny said this, and Christopher said this, and Dr. T said this. That would be very boring. And she'd be like, oh my goodness, I'm never having coffee with you again, right? But if I said, hey, we had this party last night. I'm sorry you couldn't be there. But it was really interesting. I noticed that, Destiny and Sunny, they're working on some of the same things. And it was really interesting to hear what they had to say about it. But, Christopher, he had a different perspective, and it's something that's pretty valid and something we should consider, right? And so I'm summarizing what happened. I'm not telling what each individual party did or person did, right? I'm summarizing the themes of that story. And that's what we're looking for. When we talk about synthesis, we're talking about finding those themes across multiple articles and multiple sources to tell the story about what we know about a concept. And you can be very set on doing qualitative research, but you're going to have to review quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research to really understand these concepts and define the themes in the literature. So really look for those counter arguments, look to have a diversity of sources, which also means, by the way, you're going to have a diversity of journals as well, because journals tend to focus on one perspective, and especially when they have one editor for a period of time. So really go beyond your just one journal. You might find a favorite, but you want to also be sure that you're getting that diversity. So again, 3 to 5 major themes. Organize them in some way. It could be chronological, could be alphabetical. If you're doing quantitative research, it might be in the order of your independent variables. There's lots of different ways to do it, but just try to be consistent in how you present your ideas so that your reader's not saying, wait a minute, what just happened, right? You want to see some consistency and order in what you're doing and why you're doing it. So this is an example, again, from Crystal Zanders, where she went through and presented her ideas. And you see Owens a lot in here, but that's not the only source, right? Do you see that? That she's got a lot of serial citations, and she's identified, okay, first, Black people might underrate their risk. Second, reporting styles are vulnerable to subjective bias. Third, so she's identifying these key ideas that are in the literature, and she's also showing that these ideas have crossed multiple sources. All right, and then components of the main body: describe, evaluate, examine, and discuss. Meal plan is great for this. Alternative explanations and approaches, and evaluation of literature. So this is when you're writing a paper. And then in your conclusion, you'll be summarizing the main points, providing any final thoughts, conclusions. Implications is another great thing to cover in your conclusions, and evaluate the strengths and weaknesses, kind of like your limitations that are existing. For learning objective 3, we're going to talk about some strategies for organizing your writing project. So I'm going to pause here and ask, does anybody have any other ideas, suggestions, questions about how the different structures are in the writing? Any other thoughts anybody wants to share? It's Friday night. I know you're all kind of quiet. It's okay. Okay, so let's go ahead into some of the fundamental strategies. So I have 6 strategies that I recommend for breaking down your writing projects. First, create a detailed outline. Now, it doesn't have to be the outline that your English teacher made you write in your senior paper in high school, right? It can be different styles of outlines. I love Post-it notes, probably too much. I have like lots and lots of Post-it notes. But for me, with big projects, that's really helpful to write down all my ideas and then physically move them around because I'm very much a kinesthetic learner. And that helps me. I need my visual and I need my kinesthetic. For others, it might be doing it on, an actual outline on Dr. Buffini and I just did an outline for a training we did earlier today. And it was great because we were able to collaborate on it, right? And we were able to both contribute to the process and move sections. And that was wonderful. Whatever works for you. But the idea is that you're going to take whatever the assignment is or whatever the project is, and you're going to break it into parts. That will help you make sure you don't miss something. For students that are doing projects that are assignments, I encourage you to take the rubric and use the rubric and the prompt because sometimes they're not always aligned exactly, and make sure that all the elements are covered from both the prompt and the rubric in your outline. And it's just a great shell to build your article, your paper, your project around. And then strategy 2 is to set milestones and deadlines. So how are you going to break this project into smaller tasks with specific deadlines using a project management tool, prioritizing the task, and setting mini goals? I would also say reward yourself for achieving some of these goals, right? There's nothing about like building it in and supporting yourself as you go. So that would be strategy 2. Strategy 3 is research and gather your resources early. So, when I'm working on a project, I use an AI calendar system. So I'll put in there like X number of hours to do research, right? And I'll have my AI calendar break it into half-hour increments and fit it into my calendar. And when I get to that place, I'm like, okay, let's go into Google Scholar, or let's go into this database. And I'm just going to try to pull articles and put them in a folder first. So I'm not even trying to understand what those articles are at first. I'm just trying to gather the material, right? Sometimes I see students try to pull one article, review the article, take notes on it, put that away. Then they go get another article. And that might work for some people. But what usually happens is you have to re-review everything because you did the review. I find it's better to collect, review, take notes, organize. Okay. But you always have to find what works best for you. Time management and a daily writing routine. I am not excellent at this, but it's a goal. It's a strategy. Okay. Now, I will say that there was a time period, not in the last year, but where I was writing for 30 minutes at the beginning of every day. And it was one of the most productive periods of time I'd ever had in my career. And it's something that I do want to work back towards because I used to think that I had to have these really big blocks of time to write, and they just never happened because there was always something else that needed to get done. Now, I do have a 2-hour block in my schedule every week to write, and I try to honor it. But I did find that 30 minutes every morning before I opened my email was probably the most productive strategy for me. So you have to find the strategy that works for you. But if you don't schedule it, it probably won't happen. And this is where I will mention that we have created writing groups, as I hope you've all seen, and we have a series of 2-hour writing groups every week, except during the breaks between term for the spring semester. And Dr. T ran the first one, and a few of you were there, and Destiny was there. And that was a really useful time. I got stuff done. I found it very helpful. And sometimes it also helps you know what you need to do in order to be more productive. Like Dr. T made a note of like turning off her email, moving her phone away, and having it on silent. Those were some helpful strategies to really honor that time. Another thing that I have found with this is that I don't always write well at the desk where everything else happens with my life. Okay, so one of my best tools is the public library, which is about 3 miles from my house. And I also go to William and Mary's library, which is really close to me, about 15 minutes away. I find that is a great place to go. And I'll leave my phone in the car when I do that. And I don't even open up my email when I go in to write, And so you have to find those strategies that are helpful to you, but you got to plan it for it to actually happen. This is another one I know that Dr. Bumpini and I both love, and that is peer review and seeking feedback, right? You need to be able to elicit feedback. This is part of being a professional. You don't get anything published without having peer review usually. And so it's important to build a culture for yourself of that so that you can seek constructive criticism and really be hungry for it, like really want that feedback so that you know how to be better. I think one of the biggest shifts that have to happen for students as they move from coursework to dissertation, especially, is you've got to let go of the idea that you're going to turn in this one draft and it's going to be perfect and it's going to be wonderful. That's not the dissertation process. The dissertation process is an iterative process, much like journal writing. I submitted a journal for publication an article for publication not too long ago. I got some of the most wonderful feedback I've ever received on an article. They said, this is a great article. This is wonderful. We love it. We're not going to publish it. Okay. So, and it's okay, right? So that was good feedback. It was a great article, wrong journal. So I need to go back and figure out, okay, what's a better journal and take some of the additional feedback they gave and send it back out. So it's this process of, doing it over and over and over and not expecting that it's going to be a one and done. And we're going to talk about these in a minute, but some citation management software. The sooner you start with this, the better. I haven't fully made the conversion. I'm still kind of old school. I have a lot of my research still in an Excel document, but I am intrigued by Academic Writer and some things and hoping to make that shift in the near future. But these are really good tools. And as a student at UC, you actually have access to a lot of these already. So we're going to talk about these resources and digital tools. First, I want to highlight just what do you have as far as UC? If you haven't discovered Office 365, I don't know exactly how you've avoided that, but Office 365 has this amazing suite of tools that are available to you. It's like, to me, it's overwhelming how wonderful it is. The other thing is SharePoint Editor. If you have a paper in Teams or OneDrive, there is an editor feature at the top. It's a little pencil. And if you click on that editor is amazing. Probably one of the best, way better than what Microsoft Word Editor used to be. And it will tell you how to make it more concise. It will tell you where you have jargon. It will tell you where you haven't explained what an acronym is. It is absolutely incredible what it will tell you, and humbling. And so it will help you understand that process. I just finished, last year, I wrote a text, like a national counselor exam, and I loved going through the stats, like how many words I'd written and all that. So sometimes it just, it's a good motivation tool too. You have APA tutorial. So this is actually linked to APA style. I'll make sure that I share the PowerPoint with you guys in a little bit, but it goes to APA style. If you haven't used APA style, please check it out. I actually go to APA style probably more now than I actually go to my manual, which is sitting right here. It's easier for me to look it up on style, but they also have the actual tutorial. And this is the one that I do every June. I do it every June. I go through it so that I'm fresh and current on it. You also have access to Learning Columns, TLC, which is our learning center here at UC. They have writing resources. You have free access to, well, you're paying for it, but Academic Writer, Grammarly, Zotero, and Menly. All of those are available through the Learning Commons. We have a seminar coming up on Monday through Scholar Engagement that is going to have Anne-Marie from the library is going to come and show us Academic Writer and Grammarly. So if you haven't seen that, check your organizational Blackboard, because that is a seminar that's coming up on Monday, and it's going to be a great tool. I also went out and did some research for you about just additional resources, note-taking and proofreading. In Evernote, I found this one called Hemingway Editor, which is really cool, and I played with it. Pro Writing Aid, these are all tools that can help you with note-taking and proofreading. As far as project management, Mine's not on here, but I actually use Motion, which is an integrated calendar booking system, project management system that AI takes the tasks that I need to get done and tells me when and where to do them and helps me keep me on track with those things. But you have Asana, Notion, Trello, those are all project management tools. And especially a dissertation, I think it's helpful to have something like that because it's just really big. Like it's just really big and can be very overwhelming. Some mind mapping tools, MindMeister, ZMind or XMind are some good mind mapping tools. There's plenty of other ones. Plagiarism checks. I will say this, the 365 editor will also do a plagiarism check for you and check and make sure that you haven't, misquoted something or pulled too much from one source. But you have these other ones available to you too. And then I don't know how many are familiar with WordTune, but I find WordTune is a really great AI system in that if let's say there's this, information from an author and I just can't figure out how to say it different, it will say it different for you. So you can put it in there and it will help you rewrite things so that it will help you get better at that. All right, so I'm going to stop here and I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to grab the link so I can put it in the chat, but I'd love to just, faculty, what are some other ideas, thoughts, comments you have? I'm just going to call on all of you since you're here. So Dr. Bonfini, why don't you start us off? What are some things that come to mind for you? Because I went through that.
Yeah, so when I did my dissertation, I used Zotero. I didn't realize we actually had access to that here at UC. I was not aware. I was still using my institutional login from before. So now I feel like I need to migrate it. I think I was telling, maybe I was telling Tonda or somebody earlier this week that I'm a little bit of a Luddite in a lot of ways. I have folders with research articles, like I have trauma, and then I have certain theories around trauma. And then I have certain types of trauma, and then there's articles within each of those. And so it tends to be this thing. Look at Christopher shaking his head at me, right? Like, you probably do it too, right? And so that's what I do. And then the articles that I reference a lot, I actually have them. I know you're going to look at me like I'm elderly. I have them printed and highlighted and tabbed in all the notes, right? Because I refer to them so very much. So I am trying to reduce paper because clutter is not always the greatest, but that's just how sort of my brain works. It's like I have the citations here, I have my articles here, and the things that I reference so very much, it's in a folder right next to me. So at any given time, I can just reach for it. I also, when I have writing projects, I immediately start to outline. For those who I'm working with on dissertation right now, you are now aware of this since we've already had our first meetings. And I'm like, so where's your outline for your chapter 2? And that's the first thing that I talk about because I want to see how it looks and what we're trying to cover. Because I think that when you outline, you can see what you need to still research. You can see what you need to fill in. And I think it keeps you motivated because you're like, okay, this part's done. This part is done. And it's really helpful for peer review to see what part is completed and what part still remains. So I do a lot of outlining. I really like outlines. And you know that too, LA, from our work together. I'm like, do we have an outline?
Yeah.
Like, how do we divvy it up? So I'm really big on that.
Yeah, and an academic writer does some of that too to help you outline and tag things and can be really super full. And all true confessions, I have multiple 3-ring binders up there in the closet with my dissertation articles still, and I graduated a long time ago. Still haven't let them go. Okay, Dr. T, why don't you throw in some ideas that you might have?
I am also a very big fan of the outline, and I just literally write my paper in my outline, so that shows me what sections I've completed and what sections I still need to add more to. So I do that. I also sometimes use like doing an annotated bibliography. So when I'm finding articles, I will write a little, in essence, a summary or like an abstract, but it's my own abstract, not what's in the article. And then I can just kind of copy and paste that into my paper and then synthesize it with all the other articles. So it's not just like Dr. Stretch said earlier, it's not just like this person said, and this person said, and then this person said, but it's all of these things are saying the same thing. Great. I can synthesize all of that into one or two sentences and just cite all of them in a series citation rather than this one said this, this one said this, this one said this. So I find that annotated bibliography helpful for that kind of thing. And I really can't say enough for the peer reviewer option strategy, because I've been looking at my writing for so long and I've read it a million times. And then Dr. Bonfini looks at it and is like, what did you think about this? And I'm like, no, I did not. So, using your peers because they just have different perspectives and they're going to see like there seems like a gap here. And then that's just so helpful. We're doing a lot of publishing at the faculty level, or attempting to publish is what it feels like more often. And so that if I can have a peer review it and they kind of think through some of these things as if I'm submitting it to the journal and getting the feedback. So I'm just like preemptively getting some of that feedback. And then when I go to submit it, I'm just more likely to get it accepted, theoretically. Although sometimes that strategy doesn't even work out.
Sometimes
But
you can
those
have a
are
great
problems.
article and they still don't publish it.
I know, yes.
All right, Dr. Higgins, any thoughts?
Well, my thought isn't necessarily a tip rather than exposing my vulnerability. Um, I have an editor waiting for revisions. I have a primary researcher waiting for me to submit my stuff. And, I appreciate the organizational tips, and any other ideas would be wonderful, because I find myself, and Dr. Trogan knows, in the position I'm in now, I'm teaching 4 classes. Is it tends to be, okay, I'll do the research tomorrow because I've got to answer these 30 emails. And all of a sudden, as time passes, I know that people are depending on me. So how do you, I know you said you have your AI scheduler and that, but how do you do that mentality of importance and prioritizing?
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that, please?
Well, I will say in the last year, at least for me, because I came back, I've been at UC for a long time, since 2017, but I joined full time, and coming here and then taking on the director of scholarly engagement, for me, I had to really kind of settle into the position and figure out what I was doing and all that. And I had to say, okay, I can't do this right now. So sometimes I just have to embrace that this isn't a good time. Like I've got to find my rhythm before I can do that. But in the last semester, I've blocked out a 2-hour period, and I would say 80% of the time I'm honoring it, which I feel like is a pretty good odd, right? But I have started putting that on my calendar first, right? So like that gets on my calendar before I plan anything else. Of course, our classes are when they are, so, but I've set that time. And I really try to honor it. Like I don't book, because I have a private practice too. I don't book clients during that time. If somebody asked to meet during that time, I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't meet during that time. I already have a commitment. And it's really hard when there's one more doc student who wants to fit into my calendar, just 30 more minutes, and I'm like, oh, maybe I could. No, I need this time, right? So it's like been really helpful to do that. I do, like I said, want to get back to, for me, the 30 minutes each morning, starting with that, because I'm telling you, I was more productive with that than I could have. If you had told me that would be the most, I would have said, no, that wouldn't be, but it really was. So it's playing around with it a little bit to figure out what works for you too. But you have to be willing to honor you first and think about that as an appointment with yourself. And know that you've got to give yourself that priority. And Dr. T, I know you do a lot of writing, and like Dr. Carper too. How are y'all doing it? Like, anybody have any other tips? I think it's a challenge for all of us.
I was gonna say it's a real challenge, especially when you're teaching, especially when you are on dissertations. Like for me as a chair, I'm gonna sound a little controversial. I do put my students' work first, oftentimes, because I want to make sure they're getting that feedback in a timely way. So I will say, like, I would love to say, yes, I put myself first and I do that. No. If it's like, I'm going to look at Destiny's and Tanda's and other people's, and then Jana's at the very bottom. And if she gets moved to the next day or the weekend, so be it. But that for me is sort of my own. I just need to time manage.
Yeah,
Right.
and
get
maybe
really
it's
good at
planning
that.
dissertation time, which I've done, dissertation reading time and Jana time. Dr.
Yeah.
Carper, you were going to say something?
Hi, yes, I was just going to add, I, appreciate all of the new resources around AI. That's something that I'm needing to get into because I've just been relying on my brain and it's getting, it's getting a little overloaded with a lot of things. So I really appreciate that resource. When it comes to writing for me, I had to identify the time where my mind is most free. Unfortunately, I'm not a morning person. I'm trying really hard to be, but like that mid-morning, early afternoon is the best time for me. So that's when I can really I feel like I've gotten emails are a little bit they don't take much of my brain, so I kind of get that done in the morning. And then once that's all freed up, I have that little mid-morning, early afternoon to write. So that's my peak time. And I don't write every day, so that's gonna be a fun thing for me to try. But usually 2 to 3 days a week, I try to write something. And a lot I notice that I'm in my brain a lot, so I know I need to get things on paper a little bit more. So it might help to do it every day. So long story short, I don't have much advice, but I did learn a lot today.
One of the things that you just shared, Dr. Carpenter, that I want to stress is like I've said, is finding what works for you. So, and maybe it's just because I'm in a director role and I know several of us are in this call, but when I open my email, my day is gone. Like it's gone. Like I don't know what happens. Like entered this email vortex, right? And so one of the things that I have committed to trying, and it works when I'm able to do it, is 3 days a week. I don't open my email until 11 or 12. So you may notice you don't get a response from me right away in the morning. And that's why, because I'm trying to get some other projects done. And I know that as soon as I open that email, boom, I'm gone. And so finding those things, like really thinking about when I try to write, what is taking me away from it? Maybe it's your phone, maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's, getting lost in, like, I work from home. I can tell you, I know every other chore that I want to do other than write. Like, oh, the laundry needs to get done. Oh, I think I'm going to go clean the bathrooms. Really? That's more like, and I actually enjoy writing. So it's like really taking note of what is taking you away from that. Like, I know that for some of us that are dissertation chairs, it is true. It's like I'm looking at this list of 6 dissertations I need to read in the next week, and it's like, where and how is that going to happen? Right. And do I cut into my time? Do I cut into my exercise time? Something's got to give because I still got all these meetings. So I don't know if that helps, Dr. Higgins, but that's just some validity.
Thank you.
Mhm. What about the rest of you that are on the call? What are some things that come up for you, or questions or thoughts you might have? And I can hold silence. So
I used Academic Writer for the first time on my last paper. I'd never used it before, so it was interesting to say the least. I think it takes a little bit to get used to, but I also think it might have made it a little bit easier to put the paper together, because then I have all my resources, all my references are like dropped in there, and it's all I got to do is like click on it. I don't have to like type it out. I can just click, 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 and put those references in. So that was helpful. Of course, I've only written one paper with it, so we'll see how it goes for more papers.
when I think that's a tool, these tools are often tools that get better and better as you do more and more work in it, right? Because then you're building this kind of toolbox of tools that you have. So the sooner you start with it, it will serve you better as you move through the program. Other thoughts or comments? I was trying to find, Jana, the writing list. I was going to share that, but I can't put I don't know what I did with it. Where we
Do you mean
put
to drop it in the chat? I can
Yeah,
find
drop
it.
it in
Drop
the chat if you don't
Yeah.
mind. Anybody else? Bonnie?
Yes, I know most students are fairly busy with different administrative roles and direct client cares and being a doc student. So we almost always have assignments that we're writing. But to continue to hone our skills, are there resources for writing prompts for counselor eds, for counselors that even if we don't have an active assignment where we just want to do something away from our assignments and but
Mhm.
continue to write, do you have any resources with suggestions for
do.
that practice?
I do, but it's going to take it up a level. Okay. And that is write for your regional say ACEs newsletters, write for your divisional newsletters, send in conference proposals, right? Seek out opportunities to write for the department newsletter, reach out to Dr. Randolph and say, I have this idea for this article. Can I write this for the departmental newsletter? Look for those opportunities because those really can be helpful. If you're TAing, how can you write an announcement that might be helpful? Or can you do a video for students on a concept that they're struggling with in that class, right? Can you create fact sheets or tip sheets for your peers on different topics that maybe we could share through the doctoral organization, you know? So look for those type of opportunities. I would try to write in ways that are going to be supportive of your development of your CV, things that are going to give you deliverables. Some divisions now, like I'm on the teaching committee for ACEs. We have the teaching practice briefs. We're about to launch the teaching toolbox. ACC, the Creativity Association, is about to launch creativity briefs. Those are all really kind of middle ground publications that are really supportive in the process that they want to help people get published. So you can submit those and get editorial support and encouragement to improve on those things. So briefs, newsletters, announcements, things like that, I think would be an even better one than just having a repertoire of like prompts. Others, what do y'all think? Any suggestions? Did I miss any?
I can't attach to the Zoom for some reason. So
Can you send it to me an email and I'll grab it real quick?
yes, maybe.
So one of the other questions that I want to end this with is, I'm trying to get this to go over here. Thank you. Is tell me what you need. I'm the director of scholarly engagement. This is part of my job is to create webinars and support systems for you. If you have ideas of webinars that you would like to see or things that would be helpful, I would love to hear about them. You can email me, you can drop them in the chat, you can say them out loud right now. But what else could we do? Dr. Bonfini and I work really hard to try to give you some really good resources. What are some other things that would be helpful? And can you share those ideas? Like, does anybody have anything right off that comes to mind?
So for me, again, I enjoy examples, resources, things where I can go ahead and look at and whether try to replicate or to practice trying to do it that way until I've gained the understanding of how it's done and then reinterpret it my own way. And so, yeah, I recently, last year, I switched over to using Zotero because I had all these binders and all kinds of things. I was like, this is just too much. And so I've been asked people, well, what did you do during your dissertation that worked, right? How did you do A, B, C, and D? And so I think we're really trying to come up with itemized ways, kind of like the 30 minutes in the morning, or yes, using the electronic publications. I think those are things that are the books, right? Books that kind of walk you through are helpful. What I'm kind of looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Christopher. Anybody else? Any ideas, tips, needs? All right. Well, thank you for coming on a Friday night. This will be posted in the UC YouTube later. If you're not a subscriber to that, please go into YouTube, you type in UC counseling, it'll come up and you can subscribe to it. I do hope to see you at future webinars, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.